good morning and good afternoon to some. My name is Cedric, and I'm the host today for Fly Traders. And I just want to welcome Dr. How do you pronounce your name properly?
Baba Buntu.
Buntu.
Yes.
Buntu. So
Baba
we have
Buntu,
Dr.
yes.
Buntu here from South Africa, and just want to welcome them to the show, and thank you for accepting our invitation to our live stream.
Thank you so much.
So I guess before we get started, why don't you, start off by telling us who you are and what is it that you do with your organization?
Sure. Thank you so much, Brother Cedric, for setting up this link and for inviting me on your show. And greetings to everyone who's tuning in. So my name is Dr. Baba Buntu. I am living in Johannesburg, South Africa, and I'm a director of a company called Ebukosini Solutions, which is a community-based company where we specialize in African-centered education, and we roll out a number of engagements, people-centered activities and programs. And the whole aim of what we do is really to focus on the power of the African family structure. And family doesn't just mean man, woman, child, family in a broader sense, family in a new sense, because I think we also come across that many in our communities, and when I say our communities, I mean people of African descent globally, find ourselves at odds sometimes with families, biological families, and sometimes we need to find ways of starting and connecting as family, even if it is not always with our so-called blood families. So yeah, basically I spend most of my time together with and inspired by young people. I'm very I want to invest most of my life in the lives and the solutions for young people of the African world.
Definitely. Now, I met you a few years back at the DC Economic Conference, and you said some things that really caught my attention out of all the presenters. And I just want to be able to, I guess, if we can talk about the masculinity and the safe spaces and different things like that. But before we get to that, how are you guys holding up with the COVID-19? What's the situation look like on the ground?
You know, it's very challenging in many different ways. It's challenging because the only segment of society that can really adhere to the lockdown rules and regulations and have it working for them are people who already are very secure in terms of work, income, housing, a number of things that when you have that, you may take it for granted. But the reality of our country and so many other places in the African world is that that's not a common feature. You live in a very small place. You house many people. You live very close to many other people, and you may not have an income stream that can secure you for much longer than tops a week. So after that, you start to struggle. So it is a struggle for very many, and we are waiting in anticipation. Now we are on the 4th week of lockdown, and we're supposed to come out of lockdown end of next week, but we're not sure if there's going to be an extension yet.
Okay, so it's kind of the same here in the States. You have a lot of working class, a lot of just working class people that don't have the luxury of being quarantined.
That's
so right. They're having a struggle, and there's a lot of it stems to like income inequality that's causing the problems here. Now South Africa is a very diverse place. What languages do you speak there? Do you speak the Afrotech, Afrotone, or Zulu? Is it like
okay? So there's 9 dominant African languages in the country, including isiZulu, isiXhosa, Sesotho, Setswana, and a number of others. And of course, there are also a good number of people from other countries, both globally and Africa. So those languages from other countries are also being spoken. But in terms of radio and news and public information, you'll find them in at least 2 or 3 of the African languages spoken in South Africa.
Oh, wow. Okay. Got it. And a lot of the jobs that are there, what type of industry mostly is in the Johannesburg area or the different coasts?
Right.
What are most people employment?
So there's a lot of service jobs, tourism, getting housing and transport and the city to work. There's a lot of people are employed in that. There's the mining industry, there's the agricultural industry, there's of course, there's also the white collar job industry with IT and offices, and Johannesburg, being the kind of the economic hub of the country, also draws a lot of people who have professional skills from other provinces, because Johannesburg is seen as the city to get a job or to get a career going, which is not necessarily true. I mean, a lot of people come here, and a lot of people also end up being very stranded in this city because the unemployment is very high.
Okay. And speaking of unemployment, I know a lot of places that have unemployment. It has the poverty, and then you have the crime that takes place in it, and it's just like a lot of desperation crime. Do you see an increase in crime or anything there?
Oh, definitely. Those dynamics go hand in hand, and I think now also during lockdown. So what government has done is to deploy military soldiers and the army to keep order. And what often happens is that when people are drilled to kind of look at who they are supposed to confront as an enemy, they also come in with a certain force and a certain, these are the scenes that we've seen on TV so many times with police in America and black men, and a similar dynamic you see here with black army soldiers actually confronting black communities and seeing somebody walking outside and confronting them, and I think there's been at least 5 deaths so far of people who have been, and under the pretense that army soldiers are going to help them to bring order, but they actually end up murdered. So it is so that is a crime in itself. But of course, also when people are desperate, they don't have income and they can't eat, a lot of people will seek alternative ways, and sometimes that means to steal, sometimes that means to break into some other place to get something to eat, or to find something that you can buy or sell so you can buy something to eat.
Got it. So you guys are facing basically the similar things that we're facing here in the United States, and we are, our economy is really suffering right now, but the government is artificially infusing money into the system, but it's not actually working. So when we talked about the military, the police state, confronting certain individuals and kind of profiling and having that authority to use the virus to invoke force on a particular people group. I know here we're having a issue with our leaders, and I guess, do you guys trust your leadership? Is the leadership predominantly African, or like what's the challenges there? Like, are they policy driven, and are they looking out for the people, or?
So the challenge in South Africa, and very much across the continent as well, is that most of the countries, including South Africa, we have black leadership, we have black presidents, we have black ministers, we have black people in office, we have black civil servants, we have a lot of black people who are put in place to govern the country. But you find that, and this of course depends on who you ask, because you will find people who say they are happy with government, they support government, but I think if you speak to especially the younger population, and when you speak to people who do not have all kinds of luxuries as their predominant experience, you'll find that people are very skeptical to government. People have learned that politicians lie a lot, give a lot of promises that are not necessarily followed up, and over time you become very skeptical, you become very distrustful of politicians and leadership. And I guess the answer to your question, I think, to me, to some extent, it depends on where you sit economically, because if you can afford a number of things, it seems like the government is looking after people. They are creating packages. So they just yesterday they came out with a statement saying that people who are unemployed are going to get a certain amount of money per month for the next 6 months. People will get a certain grant depending on how many children they're looking after, things like that. And of course, there is some help. So we can't say there's absolutely nothing. But the problem is, and I think this is what you are alluding to in the States as well, that these are toppings. on top of a system that already is
Right.
very skewed and very geared towards white power and European interest and Western interest. So when the system is, when that's the foundation of the system, it doesn't really help in the long run that you just put some toppings of niceness on top of it.
Got it. So yeah, and that's what I want to convey to my audience is that you guys are across the ocean and experiencing some of the same policies and problems that we're having here in the United States, and we're supposed to be one of the more elite economies.
Right.
But the policies, as you mentioned, white supremacy, being on top of that, it's the same. It's the same cycle of doing things.
True.
So a lot of the concerns I have here is there's not enough tests. We don't have enough PPE. There's no masks. There's no gloves. There's no remedy,
Right.
because there's like 8 strands of this stuff. And then the government is giving people a check, and it's most like poor people that's qualifying,
Right.
poor people that's qualifying for this check. And then they're opening the state for people to go out there and spend money, but they don't
Right.
have enough masks, and it's like a debt trap almost.
Exactly.
So like barbershops, beauty salons, tattoo parlors, these are places that the common person usually go. And so that's our concern here as Blacks.
Sure.
It's like we're being used as guinea pigs, and it looks like the same is happening in South Africa as far as the policies and the policing, the targeting, different things like that. So our economy as Blacks, we spend $1.2 trillion a year. I know that's larger than some budgets, some countries' budget. But what I guess the thing that I want to convey to our audience is that the money circulation, like how is the money circulated in South Africa? How do you guys account for? Do you do business with particular industry, particular people group? How do you empower yourself with the money? And also our relationship with each other, because you mentioned that there was black soldiers and that are enforcing these policies, and it's being disproportionately targeting. So how do you work with somebody like that? How do you move forward when you have that element there?
So can I just say something too? I think it's a very interesting point you bring up when we look at the situation in the United States and in South Africa. And I wanted to say something. I have a number of good friends in the diaspora, and I have a diaspora family myself. So I'm also quite acquainted with some of the discussions we have on both sides of the divide, because there is some sort of a divide between the diaspora and the continent to some extent.
Right.
And I think what I hear many African Americans say at times is saying that, yo, guys in Africa, you must take down these leaders. You must, why don't you stand up for yourself? Why do you allow people to come in and take your gold and diamonds and oil? Right. And I think this comes from the thought that if maybe within United States, people would think if we just had black leadership on all levels, we would be good. But I think we've tried Obama, we've tried a few other things, and we also seen that that's not necessarily the case at all. So I think it's important that people, remember, if you really want to understand Africa, you're not going to watch CNN. That's not where you're really going to get the news and what's happening on the ground. So this is maybe a step towards having the actual serious conversations happening. But I think people are not sitting on the ground. And I think that's maybe the image that people sometimes get in the diaspora, that Africans on the continent are just sitting and letting things happen to them. But you also need to study and research and be aware of the many demonstrations, the many rallies, the many uproars that people on the ground are engaging in, which never really reaches the international news unless some people die or some people are, it gets very dramatic. So we need to understand that we are actually, as you have pointed out earlier in this conversation, we are under a very similar system globally. So it's not just about you guys over there must do this, you guys over there must do this. It's more about what can we do together. You brothers and sisters in America, you have a very unique experience of working against the system that has been trying to suffocate you for decades and years. And we have a similar experience coming from a slightly different side of the coin, but it's very similar, and we have all things to benefit from working hand in hand to work against systems that oppress us, to understand how do we manage the wealth that we can create within our communities. And I think I want to say this, that there are many people on the African continent who are very inspired by what they see in certain communities within the African American nation, if I should use that word, meaning that when we see black banks, when we see black groups standing up, when we see community centers owned by black people, when we see black people governing and taking over a school and running it as a black school, that those are very important aspects and examples of what can and must be done across the African world.
Got it. Okay, well, this I lost my train of thought. There's so much you unpacked in that
Yeah, I know.
It just kind of I have to go back and take a step back and think for a minute. That's inspiration. I'm a history major. I'm a history guy, right. Political science guy. What is Steve Biko like? How has he inspired you guys in South Africa? And can you tell our African Americans? I don't think we have enough exposure to some of you guys as heroes as we do some of our heroes that we look up to, and that they can go back and research Steve Biko, who's inspired me with his rhetoric and the way he stood, and the sacrifice that he made, and peace and blessings to his family and anybody else that was affected by you guys, the revolution that took place, the more recent revolution that took place in the Western world, Western policy, colonialism.
That's right. So Steve Biko is a very important struggle hero. There's several texts from his speeches that are available, but if people research Steve Biko and the title "I Write What I Like," that's a title that is very easily available online and from bookstores online. So he is somebody who made a very great contribution to the understanding and practice of Black consciousness. He was a student leader first, and he organized African people. This was obviously during apartheid times. His time was he was killed in 1977 by the apartheid regime. So in the 60s and 70s, he was a very active champion for African freedom, for self-governance, for self-determination, and he articulated very strong ideas around Black consciousness. And his understanding and philosophical output has been extremely important for decades in South Africa, in that people, and what he managed to do was to plant very important ideas around what Blackness means, which transcends party loyalty, political party loyalty, fractions. You know how we often divide, are you Marxist, are you not Marxist, like those type of divisions. Right. But across those lines, Biko is held up as an icon amongst many people who may disagree with each other on certain political ideological questions. But that doesn't necessarily mean that as a country, South Africa is really holding his legacy in the esteem that it should be, because I think you all know that the main person that people associate with South Africa is Nelson Mandela, the first president of the democratic dispensation of South Africa. And to some of us, as much as we do recognize that he is a struggle figure and he has had some important role in that, he was also washed out and made into a very likable icon, especially pleasing white interest. So a lot of Black youth who are now more on the radical front, they don't associate with Nelson Mandela at all. They'll be offended when people say, oh, this is your leader. They're like, no, that's not our leader, because he was taken away from us. He played a particular role that was not about our self-governing and our self-determination. So Steve Biko is that name, but like I said, his books are read in school. His name is out there, but far from enough.
Got it. Now, you mentioned something that was very important. You mentioned about the different factions of how we look at each other. What do you see as a way forward? How do we heal? How do we? And you mentioned that having Black government is not the answer. What can be the solution? How can the people start a grassroots campaign to kind of turn this thing around? Like, what techniques? I know you talk about masculinity and family. You know, what are some of the solutions and ideas and
Right.
vision that you have for us to move forward in the right way?
Right. So let me maybe mention three dynamics: youth, masculinity, and family. Not necessarily in any particular order or preference, but starting with youth, I think that, and this is something that I live by very militantly or strongly, that any movement or any forward-looking action that we plan and engage in has to have young people at the forefront. And in every opportunity that I get, which is maybe not extremely many, but the few that I do get, I always bring young people with me. I always play a mentorship role in young people's lives, because this is something that I missed when I was growing up and growing into my consciousness. So I'm trying to be that for many young people around me. So the emphasis on young people, and not just have some young people for decoration in the back, but at the front, it is very, very important. Secondly, and I think this is our main focus as our company as well, is to look at the African family as a power system. And when I say, like I did describe that, I don't look at family just as parents and a child. I look at the extended family. I look at the role of elders. I look at the roles of how we can starting having schools and learning centers within our communities, how we can start drilling and shaping economies within our communities. And this has to be driven by families. If we can understand family more and when I say economic, I don't mean just money, but I mean the wealth creation, our mind, our bodies, our spirit, everything that we can create wealth with, that has to, I see the family as the first educational institution. And in relation to that, you picked up on something that I was in Washington, D.C. 2 years ago to talk about, and that was particularly on the role of African men. So within our company, we have a particular project that addresses issues concerning African men. And my wife also runs a twin project, which is particularly focused on women. And what we do there is we want to invite men. We find that there are many men who are now ready to heal, ready to be honest about the many layers of pain that we've lived through, because I think we've gotten to a stage where we can talk about the political dynamics, we can talk about government, we can talk about history, we can talk about economic marginalization. But what about the violations that we have been through? How do we articulate having been taken away from our spiritual scripts? What is the effect of that? How do you articulate that you now might find yourself an African on the African continent, speaking an African language, but still feeling very foreign to your own culture and your own spirituality? Now that creates a dark void within the spirit of every person. And when we gather as men, we want to be able to talk about that, because some of the outcomes of these spiritual voids and frustrations. Sometimes it pans out in violence within the family. Sometimes it pans in with some of us not being able to be the fathers that we wanted to be initially. Sometimes it pans out in young Black men deciding to take their own lives. So we want, and I added to that the various health conditions that we have. Some of us are not very fit physically, mentally, spiritually. And it's not because we come from weakness, but it's because we are so fatigued by the many layers that have built up over time and that we've never really created an outlet for. So this is what that is for, to create an outlet, to be able to voice, to be able to heal, so that we can shift that away and focus on the strength that we need to build. Because it's very dangerous when we as men just build a layer of strength that looks strong, and you know what I mean. Like we can mask a certain strength. I mean, I can intimidate people because I talk like this and it sounds very powerful, and people are, whoa, he's really strong. But inside, I'm breaking, I'm falling apart.
Yeah. Well, that's a lot. That's a lot to unpack. So how does a setting like that look when you're dealing with kind of breaking those layers back and getting to the point where you're healed? And then also I want to mention that when you mention masculinity, a lot of times here, I don't know if it happened in South Africa, but here people get defensive. A lot of ladies, it's just
Yeah,
kind of
sure.
like, well, what do you mean masculinity? Like it's
Right.
that's like a toxic word now. So
True.
how do you deal with the new there's a feminist
Right.
movement and deal with the stigma of masculinity? Like what perspective do
True.
you go after?
So it's we try to not deal with everything at the same time. So we try to
Mhm.
say this is what we can deal with in this space, and then we need to decide to block certain things out. Issues of sexuality also comes up. There's a whole different script now to so many things, and there's certain things we are just very open. We don't deal with them.
Right.
For instance, we don't deal with transgenderism, and it's not because we have taken a position that we are hating or that we just don't deal with that.
Mhm.
That's not what those are not the people we can help. So
Mhm.
what we do, so we try to phrase what we do in what we actually can offer and provide. So what we
Right.
do, we provide, for instance, one of the settings we do is a Black men's conversations. We just go and it's very important to say this. We have made it a point that we can go anywhere, we can sit anywhere, and we don't need chairs, we don't need a hall, we don't need to book a
Mhm.
place. We can sit under a tree, we can sit next to a car wash, we can sit, if you have a garage, and we just open the door and just sit
Right.
there and put some pillows out or whatever. That's how we congregate, and we do that. We just set it up in different communities. Over the years, we have men who have attended other workshops, and we invite them to invite us to come to their community. And you'll be I don't know, especially to those who may be watching this and say, men talking? Like, how do you get them to talk honestly? I've never heard men really belt their heart out. You know what,
Mhm.
brother? My experience is completely different. For the last 12 years, which is the running time of this project,
Mhm.
every time we start this conversation, it just takes 10 to 15 minutes, and men don't want to stop talking. And they
Right.
talk about what bothers them, what they cannot find out, the pain that they've carried from childhood, the molestation that some of our brothers have experienced when they grew up, that they now have become violators of their partners, and they don't know what to do. So
Right.
for me, it's actually, to at least to a certain degree, just about opening up non-judgmental spaces where you are being listened to and you're not being laughed at, you're not being ridiculed. And this is where your other question comes in: how do we then deal with, because there's toxic masculinity, but there's also toxic femininity. And I
Right.
think, and one thing that I always say, because I have a huge problem with feminism, but I also understand that if I was born and had the experience of being a Black woman in this world, I would definitely have been interested and attracted to feminism, Black feminism, definitely. Because for the first time, as a woman in a world that doesn't seem to address the situation that I go through as an African woman, all of a sudden there's a theory that talks about this. There's a perspective that I can take, and I
Right.
would be interested. But of course, the problem with many aspects of feminism is that, first of all, it centers very much, and its origin is very much in a white European Western perspective, and there's a
Mhm.
discord when we just transplant it into a community that has lived completely different for the last 1,000 years than any other race on this planet. So
Correct.
and I think that as African people, we don't even have to go to Europe. We don't even have to go to Karl Marx. We don't even have to go to Freud to find interesting theories. We come from interesting perspectives. We come from great philosophical models. So I think that we need to remember that we come from a script where African women have always been strong, always been respected. And as
Mhm.
men, in many societies, our role was also to take a step back and create
Right.
space, not just boast and be at the forefront of everything. So I think when we unlearn some of the toxicity that westernization and colonization has brought upon us, we
Mhm.
also find a much more a beautiful script. And maybe just tie in, we also do a conversation or a dialogue that we call Black Love. And Black love, not necessarily, it can be romantic love, but it's not so much about couples. It's more about, do we love each other as a people? When I see
Right.
other Black people, do I feel love? Even if you are irritating me, even if I think you have a chip on your shoulder, even if I don't like the way you present yourself, but my ground layer, is it love? because that changes everything. So if you irritate me, I will come at you to try to correct you with love. If I don't like the way you speak to me, if my ground layer is love, I will address it differently. I will say, I need to tell you something. I have an issue with how you're addressing me, but I understand that it probably comes from somewhere that you haven't dealt with, somewhere you haven't healed. And if that realization is there, I'm going to deal with you on a completely different level than if I just see you as somebody that I hate. And many of us hate ourselves and each other.
Got it. So, man, that's So how can we? Have you done any online? Have you done any sessions online? Have you looked at the possibility? Because I would love to get you back and see if we can get a group going and go through and talk about a lot of the things that connect us as humans, like as humans, but not only as humans, but as Black humans, as Black, the hurts, the insecurities, the being afraid, those things, and break down those layers and have a real conversation. So I would love to have you back to set a session up like that.
I would love to come. I would love to be involved. I think I'm very much interested in shaping new ways of having these conversations with brothers like yourself in different parts of the world. We have been talking loosely about setting up a Zoom conversation for African men from across the world. And I will let you know when I will give you more information as we go towards that. But also feel free to connect with me and invite me. I also know a number of other African men based in different countries who are interested to be part of such conversations. And I think the thing that makes it a little bit complicated in South Africa is that we kind of have these conversations saying that everyone's on Twitter now, everyone's online. Not really. I mean, the majority of African people on the continent are not online. And if they are online, they are maybe on a cheaper version of WhatsApp, for instance, and not necessarily being able to use the software that we are using right now. Data is very expensive on the continent, and people need to be very careful what they download, what they watch, what they stream. So that's something that I'm also thinking about. I don't want to devote myself completely to platforms that are very exclusive, but of course we also need to do things here, definitely.
Got it. So and man, we take a lot of stuff for granted here. When you talk about data and still paying for data and stuff like that, that's amazing. That with the infrastructure and the type of money that comes through the industry. So with that being said, then that seems like we're going to be going into a new normal again with the COVID. We're not going to be able to kind of meet up in person a lot of times, and it just seems like that it's kind of a dead sentence to get together until they come up with some type of solution. It's unfortunate. So, but I don't want to. I'm going to end it right here. But I definitely want to, if you have any homework for people that's listening or some things, I know you have a segment called I Got 5 on it. And,
that's right.
Would you like to share anything with the people, anything they can take, do some homework and possibly look up your organization?
Yes, so it's very easy to connect with me. On Facebook, you can find me under Baba Buntu, Buntu. You can also find out more about our company, Ebu Kosini Solutions. We can spell that out later. Like you said, I do a segment on my Facebook page. It comes from an online radio station, but it's on lockdown right now, so I do it only from the Facebook account. It's called Unstuck. It's about men being motivated to get unstuck from the many situations that we often get so strongly attached to and stuck within. So we're dealing with different subjects every week. It's on Thursdays. It's our time, 8 o'clock. So that should probably be your time, 2 p.m. Tomorrow we are going to deal with physical fitness from an African perspective. What does that mean? What kind of routines can you do? And you know that some of us we need to make these things priority. But with all the problems that we're going through, with all the challenges that we have, it's sometimes difficult to be consistent. It's sometimes difficult to find the time, and it's sometimes difficult to make it a priority. So we just want to be we want to be there to inspire and motivate men to do better.
Got it. Yeah, I appreciate this so much, and I just want to make one other point to my audience here. Dr. Buntu is in South Africa, so they are 6 hours ahead of us. Keep that in mind. But given the latest outcome of our leadership here in the United States to open some states, it seems like they are accepting consumerism over life value. So the
Right.
stimulus check and the money that they've given you, you guys hold on to that. This is not a safe time to be out there. As I stated earlier, there's not enough tests, there's not enough PPE, there's not enough masks, there's not enough gloves, and there's no remedy. It's like 8 strands of this. And this is going on around the world. This is what's happening around the world. And if you didn't catch the conversation earlier, Dr. Buntu, he explained exactly the same thing that we're dealing with here. He's dealing with in Johannesburg, South Africa. Also, money circulation. In the Asian community, money circulates 30 days before it changes hand. The Jewish community is 20 days. Caucasians, 17 days. Hispanics, 6. African Americans right now, 6 hours. 6 hours. Our money stays in our community for 6 hours, and we spend over $1.2 trillion a year. If we saved, or if we found a black business and only spent $200 of that stimulus money, we would have generated $20 million within our community. So keep that in mind. Right now, what's happening, and I would say this is a universal God thing, the economy is kind of creating opportunities to create a level playing field, and it's our mandate to kind of take a look at these policies and continue to stay on the politicians, because if this was white farmers and they were leading the pack in debts, as we are as African Americans, because of underlying health issues and segregation, I'm not segregation, but the disproportionate healthcare that we have, then the country would not be forcing people or trying to get people to spend money. The economy needs to be stimulated by blacks, and that's what they're banking on. So please, you guys, be careful. Don't go out there and until we have some other questions answered in regards to this. But Dr. Buntu, I just want to thank you, man, and we're going to do this again.
Thank you so much.
And yeah, we're going to definitely do this again. And you guys be safe there in South Africa. And I'll get back with you. Please subscribe if you haven't to our channel, to my channel on YouTube. Is Fly Traders. And do you have a YouTube channel, Dr. Buntu?
I do, one which is called Baba Buntu as well, where I posted some of the interviews I've done, some of the talks that I've done, and I'm going to add more stuff as I go as well.
Okay, sound good. All right, guys, you guys have a great rest of your day, and we'll get with you later. I appreciate it, sir. Thank you. Peace and blessings to your family.
Thank you so much. Blessings.
Right, thank you.